Here's a little pattern that I built. I placed a piece of wood underneath the opening here. I straightened this edge a little bit in order so that I'd have a straighter plane here for this piece to fit in. Then I took this pattern that I made after I cut it out on the bandsaw, and I found a piece of wood that had a live edge, and I positioned it so that it would cover the whole piece and leave me a little live edge sticking out. And if I want to use the live edge, I use it. If I don't, I won't. But this is how you get these interesting cutout pieces into the piece. See, this was a pretty good sized slab, but it had one little deficit here, and most people want a table where people can sit at it at a reasonably straight angle. I'm not sure I'm going to keep this angle. I think I might taper that a little bit. And so then I put a butterfly all the way through here, and I'm going to leave this spot kind of low with some saw marks, and this spot kind of low with some saw marks. And I've rounded the edge because this was a live edge. Thought I'd kind of keep with that whole concept. So I did all the edges round, and then I'm going to roll over this maybe until I'm happy. Maybe some kind of a cove bit on a router. And I just want it to feel kind of smooth on the edge when I touch it. And I'm going to do the same thing in here. I want people to stick their hands in here. I'm not planning on filling that with anything. I have filled some cracks. I probably filled these little cracks and this little stuff. And I filled a bunch of stuff in here. This was real rotty wood right in here. But it's going to look really cool because it's got some termite tunnels in here that I filled full of resin. And you're going to see a bunch of termite tunnels that are kind of vertical, look like a bunch of towers. It's going to look really cool. Wood rot, wood isn't any good. But what I had here was termite damage. That's different. The wood wasn't really rotten. Yeah, well, it kind of was. Okay. Termites created a bunch of access points for water to get in. The water kind of destroyed the part that the termites kind of weakened. And that happened in the kind of the center. But around the edge, the wood is still strong because they hadn't gotten that far yet. And so I took a scraper and scraped all that away and blew it out, and then put 5 coats of resin in there. And that's going to look amazing when it gets sanded. So we'll see this one the next stage. It's about 2.5 inches thick, so it is really heavy. And we'll see how it goes. That's going to be a tactile area. In fact, I've rounded that off a little bit with a scraper so that it kind of is the start of something tactile. I filled this because it had a kind of like a relief like that. I don't know what you call those, but I'm sure somebody will tell me. And you can tell by listening to it. When you tapped on it, it was kind of flaking out. Yeah, this is probably going to get tapered a little bit in order to kind of bring it into a better eye shape. And maybe a little taper here and maybe a little taper there. Definitely something here, move that off. So when I do the edges, it'll take a better design, a better shape when I get the edges done. Well, this is the final good here. All the worm holes, the termite holes that I spoke about earlier have materialized into this pretty pattern right there. It looks kind of cool. And I decided to leave this open and become a tactile region for the table. It's not really big enough for a plate to fall through. That's kind of my criteria. Can a plate fall through it? Yeah, well, maybe not. So, and then I added this piece here off to the side. It's just a single butterfly. I thought of using 2 butterflies, but it just didn't look like it needed to. And now that I'm handling it, it probably did need 2. But it doesn't need 2 for the customer. It just needs 2 for the movers because it's kind of in a spot where people tend to grab it. So you kind of have to grab it other places when you're moving this thing. It only weighs maybe 200 pounds. So you could probably just move it with this spot and this spot instead of having to grab that. And I put a round over on all the edges on the outside edge, top and bottom, to just kind of make it different from my standard edge. It just seemed like it needed to be different. And then I left some of these things open here for tactile. I might close that one if the customer wants me to, or if I get a customer for this one, I'll do whatever the customer wants. It may end up wanting some stone or just black in there. You don't know what's going to transpire with this guy. It's going to have a future of some kind. This edge was murdered by termites. It has just tons of places where I have filled it, and it's probably going to take 2 more rounds of fill. But what I found after I went over this with a little mini sander, I kind of regretted going over it at that stage. I should have just rounded off the edges first, and it only left a tiny bit in the center that needed to be done at that point. So you kind of live and learn, but I like this edge that is all of the ugly stuff is sanded off, but yet I'm keeping some of the live components like this little pin right there, and the curve of the live edge. This little guy here is kind of interesting. It's kind of an extender for a big board that may have a part that renders it less usable. So it's a patch. So what I do is I make this live, this is the live edge on this piece. And so I make it square so that it is amiable to having the full thickness of the board. In this case, it's 2.5 inches thick. So I want 2.5 inches thickness here. I don't want the edge of the tree to wane off at an angle. I want it to be square. So I take a Festool saw, a little reciprocating saw, and I make this square. And then I put a piece of plywood under there and draw the shape that I have to acquire for this piece. Then I just take that, cut it out on a bandsaw, and then I can shop around in my wood scraps, and that's what this was, a piece of something that was bigger, and cut it. And then bandsaw it out, and you just kind of tune it up with the sander here and there to get it as close as you want to get it to the parent piece. And then once you get it in there, you clamp it across with a pipe clamp and set your pattern on here. And then it's easy to just use your router with the inlay bit and the donut and trace your pattern. Of course, you have to have a butterfly pattern, so you have to make a pattern. And then once you've traced that pattern, then you can separate this piece and take it over to your bench and cut out this area with, I have done it with all kinds of different tools. Now I'm using a Sawzall. Who knew? It cuts it accurately as a pull saw, Japanese pull saw. So I've just kind of switched. The Sawzall is, for a lack of a better word, I'm going to say more efficient. You know, it puts me less jeopardy of my hands in danger. The pull saw, I've cut myself with the Japanese pull saw more than any other tool in the shop. What happens is you're putting pressure on the pull saw, and when it finally cuts through, you either resist and come back down on your hand, or you find the line and you miss the line and you cut your hand. I don't know how many injuries I've had from that little sucker. But they're indispensable, but still, I minimize the use of them and particularly pay attention to my hands when I am using them. So I prefer to use the Sawzall, and it's pretty forgiving if you don't get next to the blade. But there are some tricks, and I don't recommend it unless you've got gloves on and you pay particular attention to your safety. So always use glasses and respiratory protection, ear protection if it's loud. My Sawzall is pretty quiet, so I don't use it for that. But definitely dust protection, because it kicks up a lot of dust. You'll see me doing that. I'm getting the camera set up on my workstation next, and I'll be showing you step by step how fast I can put these butterflies in, and you'll be amazed with the Sawzall how fast that goes.